Hello, and welcome to this edition of our Limitless Live. Super excited to be on with you today and sharing this space as part of Limitless Minds. So, welcome to Monday. If you haven't woken all the way up yet, I want to invite you to grab a cup of coffee and lean back and sit in with us because we're going to get your week started off right. And I am super excited to be here with one of my fellow room tilters. This fabulous woman is an amazing speaker, working with teams all over. What I'm really excited about right now is her upcoming book, Good Awkward, which is coming out September 26th of 2023. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And I'm excited for her to help us have what might seem like awkward conversations, but for us to understand why those are most needed. So let's bring on Miss Henna Pryor. Hey, Henna.
Hello. I have to say it. First of all, Marty, she is in her Barbie pink. That is not a coincidence. And Karla, I have to say, you look delicious in that shade of pink. That shade is perfect on you. So wishing I wore mine. We would have brought the pink and the melanin to this Monday, but
it's all good.
Good to see you.
It. Good to see you too. And yeah, everyone has exploded with Barbie this past weekend. And I couldn't help but channel a little Barbie. I got my nails in. Is there and everything?
Here, I got my water bottle.
There you go. There you go. So I'm excited about our conversation today. First of all, just catching up with you because you are on the move, lighting up stages everywhere right now. And I'm really excited about the book coming out. And I'd love to talk about kind of the connection between that good awkward and the conversation we're having this morning.
Yes, I appreciate it so much. And by the way, because Karla was so kind to gas up my book, Karla has a book too called Gifts from a Broken Leg, which is on Amazon. And her boys wrote a book. So there's a lot of authorship going on in the Aghedo camp too. We'll make sure we call that out. So Karla and I, in our pre-chat, we're talking about, what is an angle maybe that has been a bit unexplored in this neutral next right step conversation. And one that came up for both of us was something that we've both experienced as women of color, women of two different colors. We've walked through life differently, in some ways, the same in some ways. And our journey has often included being in conversation or in dialogue where either someone else says the wrong thing, they've made a mistake in what they've said, or, in full transparency, when we've been the person who's said the wrong thing. And in those moments, it can be extremely difficult to stay neutral because often in those moments, we don't do it on purpose, right? We're not seeking out to be intentionally hurtful or harmful or to make someone feel less than or a certain way. And yet those conversations can sometimes be the most awkward, but also the most difficult to manage because it invites a lot of feelings in us. It's difficult to stay neutral. It's difficult to take the next right step. So we thought we'd do a little exploration about those types of conversations, and we can get a little specific about how we've seen them play out in our own lives.
I love it. So, one of my thoughts right now, honestly, is a connection to Barbie.
I love it. Bring it.
A little bit of a connection to Barbie because, she has represented beauty. She's represented play. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And she's represented maybe access to the majority, access to feeling, pretty, feeling beautiful. And I think sometimes there have been groups of people, women in particular, who haven't necessarily felt like they had access to that. Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's been so cool about this Barbie movement, especially this weekend, is seeing women of all different shades, heights, backgrounds, weight, right? Different shapes, right? We're channeling Barbie.
Yeah.
And it's been really honestly bittersweet, right? So I think empowering, I think exciting, and also a little, I kind of remember as a kid, I didn't feel like I had access to this, right? I didn't feel like this was a part of my world or this would be something that I could freely enjoy.
Yeah, it's almost making me misty-eyed because I know that story. Any brown girl, no matter what shade your skin is, of our generation knows that story. All of my
Mhm.
Barbies were white skinned and blonde haired, every single one of them.
Mhm.
And I remember, and actually, I'll never forget, it was years ago. I walked into Toys R Us, RIP. Are there still Toys R Us? I don't know. Walked into Toys R Us with my family. And at the time, there was a feature in the Barbie aisle called Barbies of the World. So it's just like a temporary thing, limited edition, right? But there was like an Indian Barbie in a sari. And I was like, Mom, like, oh my God, right? I lost it. I still have it. Pink sari, green trim, gold thread. And I lost my mind because it was the first time I had seen something like that
Mhm.
in my life, in my
Mhm.
life. And,
Mhm.
when we talk about these little subtle acts of exclusion, whether it's in our language or in our representation, it is something, as you said, that is not experienced by the majority. Not a
Mhm.
lot of people know that feeling. And
Mhm.
so sometimes this work in staying neutral is bringing awareness to that feeling and the way we walk through life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thinking about being in the mind gym, right?
Yep.
Mind gym Monday, I always think of it as what sorts of exercises can we be doing with our minds, right?
Hmm.
So that we can more effectively stay neutral, more effectively um, show up in power,
Yeah.
right? I like to say show up in power in all the
I
spaces
love
where
it.
we need,
Yeah.
you know, and truly be able to bring the best of ourselves to our space, right? Um, and not necessarily shut down, not pull back or shrink back,
Yep.
or maybe even go into um, maybe honestly stalled out panic mode, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
How do we keep moving forward um, past awkward situations, awkward
Yeah.
conversations? And I
Yeah.
have a feeling like you've got a whole book about this.
I might. I just might. So if we're gonna let's use a broad frame, and then we'll go ahead and dial into maybe some personal examples. So
Yeah.
in the broad frame, and I'm so excited, Karla. I realize I don't think I've done a live where I've talked about this in detail. So I'm just thrilled that you're letting me talk about it. So let's just use a quick definition of, in the context of our work with Limitless, in the
Mhm.
context of difficult conversations, what does awkwardness represent? So just to give some guidelines, awkwardness is an emotion that we feel when the person that we believe ourselves to be, our true selves, is for a moment at odds with the person that they see on display, with
Mm.
the person that they see in that moment. So it can be for a fleeting moment, it can be for a few moments, but the person that we think we are, there's a gap between that person and the person that they see. So just to make it real, it can happen in unplanned moments or planned moments. Unplanned moment is, Karla, I see you, out in Houston. I'm walking down the street. I trip over a crack in the sidewalk, and you're like, look at that girl. She can't walk, right? Awkward, because the person I believe myself to be, someone who can walk, is at odds with this stumbly person that can't seem to make it down the street without, tripping over her own 2 feet. Now, unplanned moments, obviously, we cannot count on or factor that there's uncertainty in life. That's going to happen. But awkwardness also exists in life's planned moments.
Mm.
So, Karla, we're in a meeting and someone makes a slightly underhanded comment, perhaps a microaggression, perhaps a misunderstanding of something that you said. And you now want to raise your hand and go, I need to correct that real quick, right? And that can feel very awkward in the action itself. And sometimes the way the person responds
Mhm.
can also feel very awkward. A silence,
Mhm.
a look of shock, a disagreement, a walk back, right? And that's a planned moment, but still the person you believe you are, with that moment of uncertainty that exists, and the person that they see, are at odds. And that's where that emotion kicks up like wildfire. And it's up to us to decide how to manage it.
Okay. So this dissonance,
Yeah.
right, between the person that you think others are seeing and maybe who you're feeling like inside at the moment,
Yes.
right? Um,
Exactly.
I love that definition. Um, so it makes me think about being in the workplace, for example,
Hmm.
and feeling awkward about the need to speak up. So
Yeah.
you sort of explained the situation where something weird was said, didn't quite
Yeah.
come across the right way, and you feel the need to speak up or you want to speak up, oftentimes we stall out at that point
Yeah.
where we
Yeah.
just don't, right?
Right.
We don't stick our neck out for ourselves, or for others. And I admit, I think I'm more likely to stick my neck out for someone else,
Sure.
than
Most of
than
us
I am
are.
for myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But I've taken some hits on some interesting, awkward comments. Maybe we won't even say they were awkward yet, right? They
Yes.
were interesting and
Sure.
potentially inappropriate. I chose not to make it awkward because I didn't address it, but it
Mm-hmm.
needed to be addressed, you
Yeah. So
know?
Karla, let's make this real. Let's
Yeah.
be real. We got Karla and I are two spicy women that, have both come from in different capacity. Karla more so, underrepresented populations. Karla definitely has walked a different journey than I have as far as representation in the United States and, under recognition, marginalization. I don't want to compare our experiences in the slightest, but one thing that we have in common, and again, I'm going to make this real today. I like to bring the heat a
Mhm.
little. One conversation that can be very awkward, or one type of situation that can be very awkward in the workplace, are microaggressions,
Mhm.
right? Microaggressions specifically. So, again, for context of this conversation, we are not talking necessarily about overt racism. We're not talking about just cultural discrimination. A microaggression, by definition, is a subtle act of exclusion that's usually not done on purpose or consciously. So I think this is the important definition. When someone commits a microaggression, often they don't even realize that it's a microaggression because it's based on years, decades of conditioning, of the way that they grew up, of the messages that they heard from their caregivers, from media, etc. And so when these comments or these subtle things come out and the person on the receiving end is kind of like, huh? Like, wait, what? It becomes a very awkward dialogue because
Mhm.
they don't realize what they've done. And now the person on the receiving end is navigating that. So I can
Mhm.
give plenty of examples, but I'm curious, Karla, does anything immediately come to mind in your own experience?
I probably could have and should have talked more about this. I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to the
Yeah.
playground. And we're
Yeah.
gonna go back to this conversation in context of Barbie. I remember playing and having girls with different hair think that the fun thing for the day was for us to comb their hair,
Mm-hmm.
but they never offered to comb mine. The
Mm-hmm.
game was to play and brush and put up ponytails or braids or whatever. There was always one girl in the chair, and I was
Yeah.
never invited to be in the chair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's like a little childhood thing, and there's been plenty of other things that have happened in life as an adult, right? But I think we need to show awareness about things like that, right?
Yeah.
Where there's this presumption that we have roles, you know, and your role is limited. It's a certain box that it's going to be in, and my role is not. Or certain people have access to certain experiences and
Mm-hmm.
certain people don't, right?
Yeah.
And I think when we're in our adult life interactions and conversations, I think it's important for us to show more awareness
Yeah.
around that, whether it's about reflecting on our childhood experiences or reflecting on something that's happening now. Just elevating our awareness and consciousness of that, I think is just so important. So
Yeah.
that's the one that comes to mind,
I
as
love
we,
that.
yeah.
I love that story because honestly, immediately I just think of that childhood Karla story as that is a perfect metaphor for what a grown woman of color would experience in the workplace.
Mm,
It's not overt, right? This is the difference between subtle acts of exclusion versus overt. You're not saying that someone said to you, "Oh, Karla, I don't want to comb your hair because it's different," or, I can't get my comb through. That was never a conversation.
right.
It
Or
was
that I wasn't
subtle,
invited to play, or that I
right? You
wasn't
were
invited to
invited to
play.
play.
We are
Right,
friends. We are playing together.
right, right.
I just don't have access to the same play experience. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, this is where no, exactly. That's exactly right. And this is where the language is so important. They are subtle, often unintentional acts of exclusion, be it by choice of language, choice of activity. So I'll give you an example for me. Again, very different experience growing up, but this is kind of makes me laugh and it kind of makes me cry at the same time. So I'm, half Indian, half Pakistani, a little more Pakistani, and often South Asians are attributed with the ascription of intelligence. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's, oh, Henna, you're Pakistani, you must be really good at science and math, which sounds like a compliment, but what it implies is you don't work hard at science and math. Mm-hmm. That's just something that you get on account of your culture and that you get on account of your skin color. And again, no one is saying that to me to hurt my feelings, to make me feel left out. Again, not on purpose. It's usually unintentional and it's usually very subconscious. It's an unconscious bias. It's not happening on purpose. But when I hear that, I'm kind of like, do they know how much time I spend on my math homework? Mm-hmm. Do they know how every summer my parents made me read science books? And it wasn't like I didn't get to read Babysitter's Club. I was reading science textbooks, right? So it diminishes the hard work because of the ascription of something based on group identity. And so I think here's where we can think about neutral, right? So when we are the person on the receiving end, so we'll look at it from both sides, because even as women of color, Karla and I don't get to skip over accidentally doing this to others from time to time. Everyone does this. And so when you've been on the receiving end of something, whether it was subtle or, slightly larger, how do you stay neutral in those moments?
So first of all, I think about grace, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to put myself on the receiving end. And I'm going to be in the situation where, for whatever reason, my colleague refused to make eye contact with me, for about a month, in the beginning of our relationship. And I had all my thoughts and feelings about what that meant. Okay. And I still have the same exact conclusion. But let's say that what I did was continue to show up, right? Continue to dig into my capacity and not limit my contributions. And I think that's so important. I've talked to many, many women in particular and women of color who actually pull back, right?
Yeah.
And contribute less in that situation. So, like, first of all, don't shy back from contributing and showing up with your beautiful brain in the room, right? But secondly, it's this idea of grace, where we say, okay, maybe this person has a different experience than I do, and they're not actually trying to be awful, right? They're not actually trying to be honestly evil or exclusionary, because these are some of the things that I think.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. It's possible, of course, yeah. That's not what's happening here. It could be their own experience that has led them to this place. Honestly, my husband's Nigerian, right? And so making eye contact, it's actually seen as a sign of disrespect in his household, depending on the nature of the relationship. And I don't want to speak for all Nigerians everywhere. I think it's important not to leave this conversation saying, oh, I learned something about Nigerians today, right? No, we're just going to take him and his upbringing that happened to be in Nigeria, and in their household and culture and neighborhood, it happened to be disrespectful to make eye contact.
I'm laughing because that's so funny. I'm learning from you, Karla, in real time. So you're saying in Nigerian culture that eye contact is disrespectful. So late 2019, we took our whole family to India. And I remember one of the first big cities we visited was Delhi. And I remember how jarring I found it, where not only do they make eye contact with you, they don't break it. So like in America, when you catch somebody catching eyes with you, you look away, right? Because you're like, why are they staring at me, right? Like you look away. In India, they just hold it. They just keep. And I remember there was a point where my daughter and I were like, can you stop looking? Like but it was uncomfortable for an entirely different reason. But what you're saying and what I'm hearing is, this is where, again, culturally, that was different for me. That wasn't what I was used to.
Right.
But to step out of your own body, zoom out, right? Take the balcony view, take the bird's eye view and say, there's a reason for this behavior that may not have to do with me, right? Forcing
Absolutely.
yourself to take that perspective so you can stay neutral and not do what I just did, which is
Exactly.
have a very strong reaction and be like, stop staring. It's weird. It's
Right.
making me
Right.
uncomfortable. Right.
Right. And so in real time in this live, I'm thinking about how disrespected I felt by that colleague who didn't make eye contact. And
Right.
I'm living with the husband of almost 11 years, right?
Right.
Who has been in the situation, like, for example, with my dad, right? Who thinks
Mm-hmm.
that all men should make eye contact and have a strong handshake, and is making meaning, right,
Mm-hmm.
of the fact that he's not looking him in his eye. And my husband's perspective is because he's my elder. So I don't look him in his
Yeah.
eye.
Yeah.
That would be disrespectful. Oh my goodness. So let's extend some grace. We're
Yeah.
all coming from a different background, different experiences. We can call it culture if you want to, but I tell you what, marriage will teach you that
Yeah.
because y'all grow up in two different houses, y'all have different culture, whether it's
Yeah.
from across the ocean or across the street. Two different houses, therefore two different culture. And if we can extend that same type of grace to one another in everyday experiences with every human that we impact, two different households, therefore two different like perspectives. So
Yeah.
after we extend the grace, right? We made sure that we're not going to stop bringing our beautiful mind and making our contributions, right? We're not going to shrink back. We're also going to extend some grace, right? Then the third piece is hopefully those two things have helped us to monitor how we're going to say what we're going to say, because
Yeah.
we're going to say something,
Yeah.
right?
Hopefully.
And
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I started out with the whole, like, sometimes I've shied away. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I haven't said anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I avoided the awkward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this third idea of we're going to say something, I think it's so important for your own personal sense of integrity to speak up.
Yeah. And I'm going to add a layer to this. If I lovingly correct you after you've committed a microaggression, I need you to take that as a compliment, because if I don't think you're capable of changing, I'm not going to waste my breath.
Ooh, that's good.
Right? If I don't think you're capable of doing better, I won't say a word, because what's the point? So if
Mm,
I find it in me to overcome the awkwardness of saying, hey, maybe let's be more careful with our words. Not all South Asians are naturally good at math and science, right? If I've said that to you, understand it's because I believe that you have the capability, the capacity to grow and be better. I believe in you as someone who can do that. If I don't, you won't hear it.
yep.
Right? Full
Yep.
stop. You won't hear it.
Yep. And I'll also add, this idea of some people think that they're complimenting, and they're
Mm-hmm.
saying something positive, like they didn't have anything else to say, but, oh, let me say this nice thing about all the people who look like you being good at
Right.
math. The other thing that could be happening is that you could be making that person feel awful because they've actually been struggling with math and science, right? And so it's just like really important for us to find something better and deeper than stereotype,
Yeah.
to make conversation, to build bridges, and to build relationships.
Right.
And I promise you there's more. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and about the compliment bit, right? I think sometimes, for better or worse, we live in a society where people are like, you're hypersensitive. I'm just trying to be nice. I don't mean it like that. When it comes to
Mhm,
microaggression work, it's a lot of, I didn't mean it like that. Right.
mhm.
I know you didn't mean it like that. My parents have often heard, oh, you speak English so well. And to that, my dad is like, well, I've lived here for 40, 50 years, I hope so, right? Like, I hope that living in the US for decades would make it so that I can speak English well. Again, it's intended to be a compliment, but all this is meant to do is, again, not to shame, blame, guilt anyone. It's all in the spirit of awareness, about having the language, about understanding that in your veiled compliments or veiled comments, for those who have a different lived experience, there can be an undertone that is
Mhm,
just useful to examine. Again, whether you're on the delivering side or the receiving side. So it's on the receiving side to create that perspective, but it's on the delivering side to just be a little more thoughtful. And I think, Karla, I want to hit this before we run out of time real quick. Let's just say somebody says something, we correct, and then they have this like immediate feeling in their body of defensiveness. Any tips on what you would do there?
Oh my goodness. So I think at that point, it's important to affirm, right? It's important to kind of self-efface and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm sure this probably feels a little awkward for you right now. I totally get it,
Yeah.
right? I've kind of been in that situation myself. But I also think it's important for us to have this conversation because I want to continue to have a relationship with you, right? And I think our relationship is best built on honesty and transparency. So maybe
Yeah.
we can just laugh through this one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah,
know,
humor is a good technique, and I got to give it to Colin. Hi, Colin. I see you in the chat. Okay, I'm gonna call you out because you're here. He does this really well, especially with me. If I lovingly call something, he gets curious. He asks questions, right? Like I'm trying to learn. Tell me more about that. How come it, comes across that way, or how come you feel that way about it, right? Like if you accidentally commit a microaggression, which again, Karla and I do too, right? We've all been there. Can you, rather than getting defensive, own it, apologize quickly. You don't have to
mhm,
over exaggerate it. It's not about your big old apology at this point, just quickly. And then get curious. What can I
mhm.
learn from this interaction? How can
Love
I do
that.
better the next time? Right. And
Yeah.
move on.
As he said, empathy and awareness are so vital. Fake compliments actually do harm, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't need any backhanded compliments.
No.
Amen. The other piece is please don't start avoiding at that point.
Yeah.
So we've had this awkward conversation. You've kind of stepped in it, and I've pointed it out. You had your moment of angst. Then we maybe laughed or we figured out how to get through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Please don't start avoiding
Yeah.
and acting continuously awkward, right? Because I think that's another piece of unkindness. It's
Mm-hmm.
unfair. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so now I'm being punished. You said something awkward, and now I'm being punished for it,
Yeah. When you
right?
can when you can name it and have a meaningful conversation about it, in fact, the opposite can be true. Rather than it becoming two people avoiding each other, you actually can become much closer, right? Because you've created
Mhm.
this opportunity to see each other at a new level, a new bonding level, and there can be such beauty in that if you let it, right? And if you don't
Absolutely,
avoid it entirely.
absolutely. So I
Carla,
think
I'm
part of
looking at
what
the
this
time.
is
Yeah.
just you know can we generally elevate conversation? Can we generally dig a little bit deeper for
Hmm.
content, right?
Yeah.
For what we can talk about that's not necessarily based in stereotype. Again, race, gender, culture, background, age, right? Ability, height, weight, right?
Politics anymore, whether you
Right.
use Twitter or not, right?
Absolutely,
Everything.
absolutely. Sexual
Yeah.
orientation, all of these things, right? There's so much more that we could be talking to one another about. And I think it calls on us to be creative. And
Yeah.
I'm good with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the other piece is just embrace the
Amen.
awkward, because we all have better, stronger relationships when we do that you know,
Yes.
try to avoid walking on eggshells. But if you're doing harm, please stop. If you were trying to do something nice, it's okay. It didn't work
Yeah.
out this time. But don't avoid these human interactions simply because
Yeah.
we won't always get them perfect.
Yeah, exactly right. And on that note, looking at time, Karla, your hair is glorious. I am good at math and science because I work really hard at it. And we can all do better, right? So today's about
Absolutely.
awareness, staying neutral, next
Absolutely.
right step, and let's all vow to stay curious when it comes to these types of conversations.
Absolutely. Love it, Henna. Thank you so much for pushing the agenda, pushing the conversation.
Yes, I don't get to do this enough.
No, this is awesome. This is so
Yeah.
awesome. For those of you who've been listening live, thank you for being with us live. If you catch the replay, drop a hashtag replay. And right here, same time tomorrow, we have more of our colleagues coming to bring you some amazing conversation, transformation, and mental toughness. Be sure and download the Club Limitless app for more content from room tilters like Henna. And we'll see you guys next time. Make an amazing day.